Greetings and welcome to Star Trek Discovery Pod, a sometimes funny, trying to be smart podcast covering all things new and classic Trek. I am your able to poor capable captain, Myrriah Gossett. With me on the view screen, we have
Paul, pretty resilient bladder for a human, Setachet. There
nice,
that's right.
nice. Clyde is on the way. He is just dealing with some technical difficulties, but he will be joining us.
Gravitational anomaly.
Gravitational anomaly, if
That's
you
right.
will. Might have sucked him into a vortex. We will see what Clyde ends up as when he shows up.
That's right.
We are talking about Charades tonight, directed by
Charade or
Jordan.
charade? Charade or charade?
It's
It's
Charade.
charade. I
Yeah,
know.
right.
I
Like
know.
the name.
Yeah. Like they say it in the episode. So
Directed by Jordan Canning, written by Catherine Lynn and Henry Alonzo Myers. But first, Paul, can you remind folks where they can subscribe and how they can support this podcast?
sure. Hey, folks, why don't you guys consider subscribing to our podcast at Apple, Spotify, or YouTube? All links at StarTrekPod.co. And if you're loving our content, please consider joining our Patreon for just $2 per episode at patreon.com/StarTrekPod. Look at that. Phasers on.
Pew, pew, pew. You
Uh-oh.
really did it.
Gravitation anomaly. Clyde.
Clyde is still stuck in the gravitational anomaly. we'll
He's
find
in
him.
interdimensional space. Interdimensional. That's where he is.
Let me just give him a relay message.
That's right.
Join when you can, my friend.
Yeah.
Join when you can. Helps if I type out a verb. Okay. Yes. So tonight we are talking about this particular episode. You can join us in the chat. We want to know what were some of your spicy thoughts, some of your maybe HFs, your HFs. What are your thoughts about this episode? Or if you have a question or a comment that you want us to pay attention to, you can type capital P, capital O, capital D, capital pod in all caps, and we will keep an eye out for those. Yeah, I think while we are waiting for Clyde to come back from this gravitational anomaly, I will also just remind folks that I and Clyde will be at San Diego Comic-Con on the Thursday. I know that there's going to be like no celebrities there, but hey, what would you consider Clyde and I, if not tiny internet celebrities?
Right. Not tiny. You guys are big internet celebrities.
Big old internet celebrities. So you can join us Thursday at 1 p.m. at the Myrriah. There's more information on our Twitter. We are going to have a great time talking about introduction to Star Trek and how to get started on Star Trek. We would love to meet up with y'all. We're going to hang out. We're going to have a great time, even if there are no panels by any of the major studios. But hey, I actually really like comics and comic books.
It's like old school Comic-Con.
It's going to be I'm really excited, actually. It's going to be like very traditional Comic-Con. Also, if you subscribe to our Patreon, you can listen to me and Giraffe and some of our friends talk about some Star Trek comics. We did those as special episodes. So if you want to dive in and hear our thoughts about some of the Discovery comics, those are also available on our Patreon. But yeah, we are still waiting for Clyde, stuck in that poor gravitational anomaly, but I think it is time for at least Paul and I to dive into some hot freaks. It's good old hot freaks time.
Hot freaks.
Paul, what did you think of this episode?
I think that a lot of people might have liked this episode. It was not my favorite.
Okay.
It was not my favorite. Like I felt like it ended really strong. Like I really liked the way it ended. I felt like it might have been a little bit too singular for me. Like, you know, as far as its comic beats and stuff like that. And it reminded me a lot or contrast with Clyde Haynes.
Clyde Haynes is in the building.
It reminds me of like a Voyager episode called Tuvix, which I'm pretty sure you remember.
I do.
Because Voyager. So we'll probably talk about that. But yeah, I imagine a lot of people really like this episode.
Indeed. Clyde, welcome to the pod. I was plugging our Comic-Con panel while we were waiting, and then we just dove into hot freaks. So what's your hot freak on this episode?
I believe I was watching in the middle of when I was watching, and I texted you guys and said, should there be a laugh track in this episode? It was comedic. Like, It was a I don't know, it was an episode that was really focused on kind of, I don't want to say hijinks, but it was lighthearted. So I'm a little bit split. Like one, I'm like, okay, it was interesting. We got the meet. I don't want to say meet cute, but we got the progression of Chapel and Spock, and I like that probably more than I thought I was gonna like it. To be honest with you, I was kind of rooting for it toward the end. Um, but it just also was just like, oh man, it's your body swap episode. Like there's always one. And so I was kind of like, all right, I'm gonna try and appreciate this for what it is. But the ship didn't go anywhere.
I was like, this had no elements of a Clyde fave.
No, but I like the romance. I like the kind of the romantic thing, and
yeah,
it had a mean mom, like a, kind of a.
I am so 50-50 on this episode. There are things that I absolutely loved. I loved the birdcage mom parent, like it felt like if y'all are familiar with the movie The Birdcage with Robin Williams and Nathan Lane, it felt like that whole charade, if you will, happening for that dinner, which I loved. I thought Ethan Peck and I thought Anson Mount were hilarious. I had a great time watching them. I loved the team up between Chapel, Uhura, and Ortegas. Like, I loved seeing the three of them together. Give me a whole episode that is the three of them together. I would love to see that. But my biggest, and I will say biggest problem with this episode would be that, like biracial people are whole people, and you cannot split them. And I feel like I thought about it as if, I was texting with friend of the pod, Giraffe, about this episode because I was like, hey, my internal radar sensors are going like, woo, 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 watching this episode. Is it me? And she went, absolutely not. It is not just you. And we were chatting, and I don't want to put words in her mouth, but I said to her, I was like, this feels like if I wrote an episode of television about Giraffe and I said, you know what, Giraffe, you're going to wake up and be white. And then we're going to pretend that you're black for this entire episode instead of just pretending that you're Giraffe, who is in fact a biracial person. And so I had a huge problem with this episode. I had a really big problem with this episode.
Well, I mean, I had a similar thought, right? Like I was like, oh, this does feel kind of like from a racial standpoint. It's like, oh, the black person wakes up and they're white and they're trying to, pretend to be, well, the way it is, and you're trying to pretend to be something else, right? Like it was kind of like, okay, slapstick. It just kind of, I kind of acknowledged it, and it didn't quite sit, like it didn't fit. I don't know. I was trying to stay positive with the episode, so I think like you, I'm a little 50-50. There were some high moments, and then some moments like I'm just not quite sure what I'm feeling here.
For me, like I just saw it as like, oh, Vulcans are really racist.
Oh no.
Yeah.
I mean, like, like this is not the first time in canon where like you see Vulcans going like, like they're really looking down on humans, like, and that's just part of that. Like I was thinking about it, I go like, oh, who's like really not that racist? Klingons. Klingons are basically go like, hey, dude, can you fight? You must have some Klingon in you.
I mean, my big thing is like, and I will tie this back to the rest of this season is they have been talking to La'an about how genetic determinism doesn't exist. And then this whole episode erased that because they said, if you take away Spock's Vulcan genes, you get rid of everything he has learned culturally about being a Vulcan. And that also contradicts everything they've ever said about Michael Burnham, who culturally grew up in a Vulcan society and had to learn to reconnect with her humanity after growing up in that society. And then they also contradicted themselves within this episode when Spock says, as Vulcans, we have big feelings. We have to learn to suppress them, which is him saying, all of these cultural aspects I just showed you are learned cultural aspects and not through genetic determinism.
Well, I mean, that gets into an interesting conversation, right? Like more than just kind of race, especially the observation of race, right? Like, we talk about having someone who's biracial, right? Now, the thing about being biracial, in part because I have family members who are biracial, and, there's a whole conversation there about kind of even my genetic makeup. But there's a sense of like, well, you may look a certain way, but depending on the environment that you grew up in, do you have to choose? And are you one more than the other? Like there's this whole dynamic there. And to your point, what you're saying is, well, if I just change your genetic makeup, then nothing that you experience, none of the things that you grew up with matter, right? Then it's all based on your genetic makeup. And that doesn't track, right?
Yeah.
And so it's, we talk about like if you woke up, like if you're a black person and you woke up white, you're still black. Like all of a sudden it's like everything that you've known and learned hasn't just like fallen
Left your
away.
body. Yeah.
Right. What typically happens when we see things like this done, particularly in comedies, right? Like, I think Eddie Murphy did a really good one on like Saturday Night Live, I think, where he had one where he went in whiteface, right? And kind of said, I'm going to experience life as a person who's white. That depicts someone who looks, and then it becomes about how everyone else treats you, not about suddenly like, okay, I'm different because I look different. I think that was the thing that probably didn't sit. Like I think that was the missing key for me. It was like, oh, that's why this doesn't feel like it fits, is because it's like, oh, I look different, therefore I am different.
Yeah. And I think so. In order for me to like fully, I was like, I wanted to like this episode so much because I love campy Star Trek. Like this episode should have been made for Myrriah with like how much silliness there was. Like these are all things that I love. To me, what would have worked if you wanted to keep this episode almost exactly as it is something happened to Spock on the shuttle to where he now has to go through human puberty, which is essentially what happens to Spock, right? Like he has to go through human puberty and he's having all these rushes of emotion. He's having all of these crazy thoughts and ideas. He has no control over himself. I was like, then you don't have to have him waking up as quote unquote as human and only as a part of himself.
Well, what you're talking about is kind of what we saw with Saru in Discovery, right? Like all of a sudden Saru had these
Exactly.
these feelings that he had to process, right? Yeah, I think, and Michael in chat is saying they changed their genetic code, season 1 episode, when they changed their genetic code to look like other aliens. Again, they changed their genetic code to look like other aliens.
But it did not affect their skill set, their knowledge, their cultural practices, like
who they were, right? They looked like and appeared to be others. And I think that's what kind of
and Lynn brings up there's the Voyager episode Faces, which is like I think the easiest comparison here, right? Is that particular episode, which I also, when I watch that episode, I have major problems with. And I think it's unfair to keep doing this to folks who are multicultural. And say like, oh, you are only parts of these different places instead of being your whole oneself.
Yeah, Lynn, that's a great comparison, by the way. I thought that the Voyager episode, I think what's the thing that I would be curious about that particular episode is that becomes the question of if we're talking about genetic makeup, are there certain behaviors that are attached to that genetics, right? Right. So are we saying that because you are Klingon, you have higher levels of aggression, or are we prediction for aggression, or are we saying that as Klingons, because of their culture and society, that's where the aggression comes from? I think you could look at somebody like Worf and say, you've got somebody, here's Worf who grew up around humans, right? even then, where was like, did he still have that same Klingon aggression because of his genetic makeup? I think that would be the interesting thing to kind of dive into.
Yeah.
Well, let me ask you this. Let me push it, because I hear what you're saying, and I completely agree with you guys. If like we went through this episode, and then Spock came out Andorian, just completely different, and then had to deal with Andorian feelings or whatever, would there still be the problem, or is it just because? Not just because, but is it because like this is too close to what we have to deal with, on a societal level?
I mean, I think it is close to it is because of what we have to deal with as a society currently, right? And to me, that is what is good sci-fi, is making us sit back and deal with these feelings. And so to me, there could have been a better way to have this conversation than this episode. Like, I think this could have been a really interesting conversation about cultural expectations. And like at the core, that's what I thought they were actually trying to do. It was just the approach was not done in a way that I think is culturally sensitive to the world that we live in right now. Right. And we can, like, to me, this was like the most TOS episode in both the best ways and the worst ways. Like, this to me felt like a TOS episode in that there is a stumble. Like, we've seen this from Spock before in TOS, and like people have had, like, when you go back and you rewatch, you're like, oh, there's some issues here. But at the time, this was really progressive. And I feel like we are beyond 1978. And so it's like, we should be able to find a way to have a conversation about cultural expectations and cultural knowledge and cultural experiences that is not belittling and creating this conversation around genetic determinism based on race. Right.
And this was what my experience of the episode was I go like, oh, like, once we get to the dinner and at that point I go like, oh, this is about racism to me. Like, that's how I see it.
100%.
It's about, here is this group who goes like, you're not good enough because you're human. Everything before that, like, I go like, oh, and I kept on comparing it to the Tuvix episode, because like I felt like that was a really interesting blend of like Neelix and Tuvok, and it felt organic to what that episode was doing. Whereas going like, oh, here is this blend of these two people, and all of a sudden everyone's concerned about splitting them apart, and then this new person goes, I don't want to die. I thought that was a really good way of like, hey, I'm more than just the two people that I came. Like, I'm a person. You're killing me, and at the end he goes, I forgive you. Like, so I thought that was a really good thing. So like, I sort of felt like if Spock was just Spock, and in a human body, would there be any problem? Like, because the episode would still work, right? Like, you just did. He's still Spock. Like, except now his hands can't hold the pot. Maybe.
But Amanda can hold the pot, so it comes back to, it's a learned cultural practice.
Well, like, and so like, but like, but Spock doesn't have the, so like, like, to me, like, it was a choice to go with hijinks that kind of subverted, like, like in my mind, right? I go like, this is a racism thing. This is about, how someone in this particular case has more power, and like, looks down on this other group, and like, has these unfair expectations or whatever, the preconceptions, blah, blah, blah. And I go like, oh, they really stumbled in the first half because they went for the comedy. That's how I saw it. Like, I go like, oh, why is he acting this way? Why do we need this adolescent kind of emotion thing? Aside from aside from the comedy of it, which can be funny. Anyway,
yeah, no, look, I don't want to take us too deep down the rabbit hole, but I think this is a fair conversation, right? And I think this is one of those episodes that I think people have every right to feel like, wow, I thought this was great. Like, there are people who are saying this is one of the best episodes. I'm not going to argue with that, and I'm not going to say that this wasn't the best episode for you. I think there were some absolute comedic moments. Paul, to your point, I enjoyed the second half of this much better than I enjoyed the first half, because I thought once the parents arrived, it got really interesting for me. Seeing Spock with his mother
100%.
was
Mhm.
just incredible.
It
I
was
Like
love
that
Amanda.
dynamic
Yeah.
and what he started to learn from interacting with her and being able to see her experiences, that to me was super rich. And I was all for that. And I was like, I really need more of this. Seeing T'Pring, right? Because I
Oh my
think
god. Can we talk
we've
about
seen
T'Pring's outfits in a minute? Because
they're
holy
great,
crap, they are incredible.
right? But I also look and I
3
saw
hours.
like
3 hours though.
yeah, yeah, 3 hours. Well, I think it was interesting because we always see T'Pring as kind of I'll say it, a little harsh with Spock,
Mhm.
right? And she's very demanding. And she's like, I want this, I want this. And then so to see her with her mother and to see her a little bit, to be honest with you, a little more vulnerable because now she's dealing with her mother
Mhm.
who's off the charts, right? I thought was like, wow, like I actually had significant more compassion for T'Pring than I usually have. Um, I really did not like her mom, especially the way her mother treated her husband, T'Pring's father. I was like, come on, man, the dude just wants he likes the food. Like let
Let
the
him have
man
a
have
snack.
let him have a snack. Um, and so like I think that was really interesting and kind of that dynamic, like all of that. Like I couldn't take my eyes away from the screen there. And then to your point, and then to see the chapel journey, right? And that dynamic, and then the dialogue. Like the second half of this was phenomenal to me. Like I was like, okay, now you've got my full 100 divided attention. The hijinks was the hijinks for me, and it just kind of like to me, if I just watched the second half, I don't know that I needed the first half. Like it, that's what I'm saying. Like it just didn't quite
Mhm.
fit to me.
Yeah, like there was something that was really interesting and that I've never seen in any versions of Star Trek where Spock has empathy for his mom. I've seen him love his mom,
Mhm, mhm,
but like we've always been concerned about how Spock is like, oh, I've been ostracized. Oh, oh, poor little Spock in Vulcan, and everyone picks on you, blah blah blah. And this is the first time you go, oh my God, his mom must have gone through a
Hell and
lot.
back.
Yeah,
mhm.
and like, and what was really great about the episode, which I thought was an excellent piece of storytelling writing, is like, it, as a human, he barely gets through the whichever. But when he's full Spock, and uh T'Pring's mom like dogs on on Spock's mom, he gets emotional and goes, he's past, he's
Yeah.
past the thing, and he goes like, no, you don't get to talk about my mom that way.
Mhm.
And I was like going, and like everyone's going, what's happening? What's happening? And so
Mhm.
so I felt like that was really good for the character of Spock. Like
Wh-
in a way where I like he's really grown through this because of his ability to mind meld with his mom and to see that moment where like, oh, my son is happy for the first time and I will just spend the rest of my life not happy on Vulcan.
Mm.
Yeah.
So it brought me to tears. I thought that was a really good a good what you call it a good bit of storytelling there.
Yeah.
I thought it was excellent. Like, I mean, absolutely phenomenal. I'm curious, what did you guys think of T'Pring basically calling everything off?
I mean, I get it in some regards. She's just like, I'm too stressed out at this point, and like, you seem to be really distracted. And it is like a big break of trust. Like the idea that he's going through something this big and will tell everyone but her. And so I think she probably is like, I need some time to reevaluate. I also think it's a clever plot device for us to not be mad at Chapel and Spock for hooking up at the end of this episode
I
because,
don't know
like
because they
friends,
want to break.
they're on
Is
a
that a
break.
break? Well,
They're on a
Mm.
break.
space break, baby, space break.
I,
But like I wasn't exactly happy about this because Spock could have just said like, "Oh, well, you're gonna mind meld with your mom," like
And she could know.
and I shouldn't tell you that. I mean, that's
yeah,
that's
I
the
thought
lore,
that
right?
too. Yeah. Mhm.
Uh, uh, but like like for me, I thought it was a little like she was fine until Chapel walked in, right?
And I think to Nicole's point,
Mhm.
T'Pring's not dumb. She knows that he has feelings for Chapel, and she's probably like, "Go have your moment. Go have your moment with Chapel, and then come running back to me."
I think to me it's a little bit of all of this, right? So when she said what she said, I was kind of like, wait,
And to
you're not
Mr.
going to give. You said what?
Oh, Mr. Joseph's point, like, do you remember when we all kind of hated T'Pring
Yes.
from
Like-
Jump on things, and now I'm just like justice for T'Pring. Like,
yeah, like I never hate T'Pring. I think she was great. I mean, I do have residual like future angst for her making
you know.
fight.
But this T'Pring, I'm in.
Like she's been nothing but lovely. She's been nothing but
Also,
lovely.
this actress just like really
Killing it.
So
kills
the
it.
actress is killing it. Like the actress is killing it. Like I think she's phenomenal. I thought she's been a little bit tough, but so when she says, "Hey, you basically you told the whole ship, but you didn't tell me," my first thought was he kind of couldn't, because you were gonna mind meld with your mom. And I'm also looking at him and going, but wait, don't you understand? He got everybody involved to protect you, right? Like here you are, you're stressed out. He's gone through all these things just to give you some peace, right? This was the way I was looking at it. But to Nicole's point, she ain't dumb. Like part of me was like, the minute that she walked in, she was like, oh, this heifer again? Oh no. But part of me is also looking at like, it's not like she's some some woman down the hall that walked in, right? Like she's the nurse, like she's part of the medical staff, right? Like that's her job to help him.
But T'Pring's seen her make out with Spock, so like it's all
Again, back
There's
to Nicole's point.
inklings.
T'Pring ain't dumb, right?
Yeah.
But the idea of, to me, it's though, look, I think what flipped it for me, and now you got me saying justice for T'Pring, is that what I would have expected is for him to go, wow, my situation with T'Pring has just ended. I need to process this. But literally 5 minutes after T'Pring has said, we're on a break, you're tonguing down Chapel? No, man, that was no. Nope.
I find the Chapel character really interesting because I felt like a lot of last season I kept being like, I need to know more about Chapel. I feel like right now we only get like her romance notes, and I feel like I'm still in a little bit of the same place. This episode gave me like, I liked all the moments where she's fighting for herself, like when she's like, I want to go do this Vulcan Science Academy thing, and then she's like, wait, I don't even need this Vulcan Science Academy opportunity. I went and just did all of this amazing scientific discovery on my own. Props to you when you read my paper about it. Like I was like clapping for Nurse Chapel. I was like, I am here for you to fully come into yourself as a professional and like as a a medical professional, and you're just like, I don't need the hierarchy to tell me that I am valuable. I'm finding the value in myself. And I also appreciated that she seemed to be the only person who was like, we have to fix Spock. like if like one of my friends woke up and was literally only half of themselves, I would hope that everyone was all hands on deck to fix that. You know what I mean? So I was glad to see her like be this force for charge. I wish I saw some of that charge from other people around her. But I also am a little, I'm gonna hold some opinion until we get to the end of the season, because I try to know that we don't get as many episodes as we used to for character development. I want to see her develop outside of the confines of a romantic relationship.
Yes.
Well, would you like a Paul prediction?
See what?
Would you like a Paul prediction? It's like a Myrriah prediction, but like
a Paul prediction. Yes, let's hear a Paul prediction.
So, like if you're gonna marry canon with like our TOS with this,
right?
What I'm thinking is like Spock and her will have this great romance, and then something happens to Spock where he forgets it.
Interesting.
Like, permanently, and so that's why in TOS she's always after Spock, and like and we don't have the perspective of why that is.
I mean, perhaps I think I mean, I think the only person who could really do this much damage would be Peanut Hamper,
Boom,
who could
boom.
come in and erase all of these memories.
Strike.
Oh, you got me. No, I'm with everything that you guys are saying. I really would love a Chapel centric episode where we get to see her, and to your point, Myrriah, maybe it's Chapel, Uhura, and Ortega's, right? Like maybe we get to see them do them.
Yeah. I loved watching them be like, girl, just tell this crazy blob of an alien that you have feelings. But I was also like, she could also just say, I'm his doctor. And I think that
Like,
also would have worked.
there's a lot of ways to go. But I also, and I loved like that sense of empowerment where she was, it felt like at the beginning of the episode, she's like, I need this Vulcan kind of, what is it, the internship, like I need this because I'm trying to validate myself, I'm trying to show this, and at the end of it, like this sense of self that's like, no, like I'm out here doing all these things. And he's like, wait, what? You had your chance. Like I love that. And again, look, so something you got to know about me. I'm not really a fan of
Clyde
people.
Haynes reveal.
Listen, I'm not really a fan of people in relationships being with people outside of their relationship, right?
What?
So it's kind of a non-starter for me.
Not
so
an
it's like,
adulterer? Oh my
no.
God.
So it's kind of like, so I'm all for like, if you feel like you want to be with somebody else, then stop where you're at and then go over there and do that. And so I have no problem with Spock and Chapel. I'm actually interested in it. I was more interested in this episode than anything than I had been before. My issue was that kiss, that whole thing would have been great next week.
I could
It would
see
have been
that
great
with
next
a little
week.
space. Although
Give
I'm
a
really
little bit of
enjoying
space.
Stress VK's prediction here. I predict Chapel will drop Spock and she'll have a fling with Ortegas, and that will allow them both to move on. I would not be mad at that.
I think that could be possible.
Not
Although,
mad at that.
Be possible. What did y'all think of Pike's cooking in this episode? Also, I loved all of Anson Mount's facial expressions throughout this
100%.
entire episode.
He was the best straight man.
Oh
Best
my
straight man.
God.
And as far as his cooking, you would see that in like, Scandinavia cooking right now. Like,
Straight out of Nomo.
That's right.
I mean, I feel like because it feels like there's not a lot going on, like we don't have this big bad that they're fighting yet. I'm like, there almost needs to be like a webisode where you've got like the Pike cooking show where he's just like cooking.
I need the cookbook. I need the video demonstrations.
It's like I'm waiting for somebody to step onto the Enterprise and say, oh, Captain Pike, I've been watching your podcast and it's amazing. Like, can you sign my cookbook? Like, I mean, because his stuff is just my cook pad. Like, I mean, I'm looking at this stuff and I'm like, yo, I'm almost expecting Paramount to put out a Captain Pike.
Oh, that's
like recipes at the end of the season. Like,
I think that'd be great. Like, a line that I had a hard time with like, oh well, I put some salt on the dish because starships run hotter than a Vulcan kitchen. It's supposed to be fucking hot on, in Vulcan. How high is that starship running? Like, there's a breach in the warp core or something. That's.
I actually like that line because
really cold.
I was like, no, it was like everything. Because when people say, typically, look, I do like to cook. When people say, oh, it's too salty, it's because you made a mistake. Right? It's like, oh, you slipped, this too much. But he said, oh, it's a little salty. And he said, no, that was purposeful. Here's the reason why it was like that. And I was like, you go ahead, Captain. You tell them. Don't let these Vulcans come into your kitchen and check you on your recipes. You let them know what's up. I was all for it.
Yeah. I loved all of the costumes in this episode, seeing the updated dress green kind of robe look on Pike that we've seen on Kirk in so many episodes was like chef's kiss, if you will.
and the Starfleet issue beanies. Oh my God, they're amazing.
I saw someone.
I want one of those.
I saw someone on Twitter who was like, they should have put him in the Spock helmet because then it would have been canonized. It made me giggle. But yeah, I loved all of T'Pring's outfits are just like incredible. Like I am ready to see so many cosplayers in these outfits. It almost made me want to learn how to sew more than a button watching some of these outfits come down. But I loved all the ceremonial outfits. I also really enjoyed, like, I probably laughed the most at all of the parental interactions during the ceremonies. Because one, I'm just rooting for Amanda. I think, and I know actress Mia, what's her last name? Kirshner. She was in recovery from cancer when this episode when they filmed this episode, and so I was just like very impressed with her energy levels and the performance that she brought to it. And she looks, I mean, I don't like commenting on people's looks, but she looked so beautiful and like. And I'm so glad to see her on our screens again. I have to sometimes battle internally because I watched the L Word as a youth, and her character on the L Word was atrocious. So I have to be like, this is not Jenny. This is not Jenny. This is Amanda.
she's a new, like the actress is new to me. For you to tell me that she was battling and she was in recovery from cancer is shocking. I thought she was stunning in every facet of the word, the way she popped on screen, the way she portrayed the nuances, like these little things, this motherly kind of affection for Spock. Like I thought it was incredible. Like those interactions were, I mean, some of the finest. If we're really talking about kind of, again, the second half of the episode, those little interactions was brilliant. There was a lot of genius in the room. Because look, the dad made me laugh, but I thought that from a comedy standpoint, I thought the timing was perfect. Like
there's really good pacing in all of those scenes, those dinner scenes.
And he's just kind of like, you talk about a straight man. He's the person that's just, he's still in the joke. Like you've moved past the joke and he's still in the joke. He's like, is this charades? Like, what is it? Like, is this the word? Like, he's still looking at charades. You're looking at him like, just let that man eat. Like let him have a snack for real. Like he's still in there. And I was like, for some of these moments that are really, really heavy, because you're looking at T'Pril and you're like, I just want to choke you, right? Leave Amanda alone. Leave Spock alone. Be nice to your daughter. He brought in just enough levity for you to not be angry. Right.
It's so interesting because like I'm a person who goes, I get T'Pril's, remember I'm a monster, so like accept that. But like I go like imagine like I was thinking about this all day. I was like, imagine if we found like a cave or some whatever, and there were like hundreds of Neanderthal like living like hunter gatherer part, like and then they get incorporated into our society. Like I think I'm a pretty open minded guy, but like I've been indoctrinated to think like, you know what, I'm better than the Neanderthal. And then
justifying the racism of Vulcans right now, Paul?
I am not justifying it, but I'm saying that like I can see how that perspective happens. Like it's like here's Vulcans who had warp drive like centuries before like humans, kind of.
It's like a little pat on the head, like, oh, you little human.
Exactly, and then like now my daughter is going to date and marry a half Neanderthal. Like, there's a lot of like indoctrination that I have to overcome in order to like to get it.
I just would expect, even in the Neanderthal case, I would expect some kindness and at least the attempt at understanding. I mean, stress-free case says it. Like, she basically said humans stink to their faces. And not even just humans. Like, she was really calling out Amanda. She was like, there's a smell in here. Don't you smell that? And she's like, I know where it come from. Like, that, like, get out. Just get out. Just go back to the transporter pad and you go. Because like that was just too much for me. And it just kept going and kept going and kept going.
Yeah, to me, I go like, that's me visiting my mom on Sunday.
Oh wow, Paul.
Like and maybe I've grown such a thick skin that I can hold like a Vulcan teapot or whatever. But it's just interesting. Like I wasn't offended by that. Like I there's a certain candor in it that emotionless candor, and I have been called a robot, and maybe this is why.
I mean, I think to me the only redeeming quality to Tapril was that I think she genuinely wants the best for her daughter.
100%.
Fair.
Her methodology is like
her methodology is flawed,
gross.
but
It's gross. It's gross.
Yeah.
Like we could say it's gross, but like it's not something like I don't know or I haven't seen or I haven't experienced. Not like I've seen this. It's not the preferred way that I would like to deal with humans, but I do feel other humans do this to other humans. It doesn't require like this space alien race to be a dick. I know, Clyde. I know it's hard for you. I can see it in your face.
Here's the thing. I'm just trying to decide how much of myself I'm actually willing to share on a
Clyde
podcast.
personal moment.
Clyde personal moment.
Look, I just grew up having experience sitting in living rooms with parents who had serious issues with me because I looked different than their daughter. So this is always going to be hard for me.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Like being there and smiling and trying to show how qualified I am. Right. And how well-mannered I am. I'm looking at Tapril and I'm just like, ugh, I can't. I'm not gonna give you any slack. I'm not cutting you.
I hear you. I hear you, buddy. I can see that.
I wonder if if this was a show where we got 22 episodes, we'd probably eventually get like the Tapril backstory. You know what I mean? And I wonder if
redemption arc, maybe, yeah,
a redemption arc. It's like maybe she originally fell in love with someone who was like not of her class, and she didn't get to, and so now she holds this deep, seated, hatred for anyone who actually gets what they want out of love, and all of that could be potentially possible. But
yeah. Crazy rich Vulcans, baby.
So I gotta say on the other thing, let's see if I can find it. Like,
I mean, honestly, a great comparison.
Listen,
for the dinner scenes, scenes.
Yeah, that's right.
Can we just give a shout out to Mbenga for the incredible work he did with the cosmetics? Because Nicole, again, like I was just wondering if those ears were gonna fall off, like Spock's, like his ears. Like I was like,
it was funny. I was like, oh, did they just grab the extra ears from the makeup trailer? Like like hand over.
Like I was like, throughout everything, he's worried and sweating and he's holding on to the pot and like in any other kind of comedic form, you would have seen the ears like start to
peel,
at least one ear peel a little bit, and he would have been just like.
I don't know if it's because I recently rewatched Mrs. Doubtfire, which, by the way, does not hold up very well in a lot of ways. In a lot of ways. You're like, oh, the mom has a lot of really good points.
No.
You're like, she just wants him to have a job. But yeah, it is that moment of like, what is the comedy of errors that's going to happen when you are in disguise? And we got mostly just the emotional disguise, which again goes back to, anyway, I was like, I'm trying to be positive, you guys. It was like, this was my emotional cycle of watching this show, and this episode was like, I am having a good time. And then the reality of what was happening would slap me in the face. And I was like, I don't know if I can enjoy this.
Well, I had a moment when I was watching it and I was going, okay, so here's the trials, right? Pour some tea. Like shut up and listen for like seems like a pretty like 30 seconds.
It wasn't that long. Yeah, just like hear a lot of
and pretend to get a memory. Was it really that hard? Was it really that like?
And we're all human saying this.
Yeah, that's right. And I'm going like, human Spock, are you really having that hard of a time just to go like, oh, my mom shared a memory about her, like her buying turnips at the market. I don't know, but like it didn't seem that hard. And so when like Tapril goes like, if you were a human, I couldn't figure, you wouldn't be able to do it. I'm going like, what?
Because Amanda literally goes through and does the whole thing to demonstrate it to him.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly. I'm going like,
Which goes back to my point that it is not genetic determinism, it is culturally learned.
which goes back to my point, racism.
Yes. Yes.
I mean, again, I think when we look at this, the star of this episode is definitely Amanda, right?
I mean, Amanda, and my thing is like, the other thing is Ethan Peck did just like a master class of range.
Killed it.
He did.
He killed it. He was a true MVP of this episode. I thought Ethan Peck really just like went for it with a capital W, you know, like
he went full human. Full human.
human. I did want to just like mention, and I don't want to be like the downer parade, but I know a lot of people view Spock specifically as a culturally important figure in like the Jewish community. And I've seen a lot of people online, and I'd be remiss if I didn't mention it, that were very upset that he went ham on bacon. Like he went really intense on bacon, and a lot of people were like, you're really going to take this like trope with like a character that is seen as like, anyway, I don't want to be I'm like,
I don't understand that, because I mean, I like bacon, and I can completely understand if you're eating bacon for the first time, how you might be excited about bacon. Maybe I missed that. Like I was like,
well, it's not kosher. That's the problem. Yeah.
Well,
right.
So I have friends who are Muslim, and when they accidentally eat pork, they're like, "Oh, I did it! I got secret pork. It was so good." Because like, you know, if they don't know, you know, like it was an accident. Like the reaction seems to be consistent when I see people who don't eat pork, who get pork.
I mean,
but I totally understand what you're saying, Myrriah.
Yeah, it was just like I saw people talking about it. I was like, oh, I didn't even clock that. Like, I appreciate when people point out these things in spaces where I'm like, oh, I had no idea. Thank you for educating me. In the same way, like when I was having my alarm bells going off, and Giraffe was like wonderful enough to be like, hey, here are the feelings I'm having as someone who's biracial, and here's why I have a problem with this episode. But her and I texted for a long time because we kept being like, it was well directed. There was beautiful costumes. We thought the acting was fun, and there was fun parts of this episode. It's just like, it sucks when something that you love and you want to love takes a swing in a really wrong direction, you know?
And yet you're still friends with me.
All the time, Paul. All the time. But yeah, I had I thought, I wanted to go back to Ahura and Ortegas and Chapel, because I thought that little team up made me so excited, and I want to see more of those three together on all kinds of adventures. Like that to me was some of the most exciting parts of the episode, of like things that I want to see going forward.
Like
go ahead, Paul.
For me, like what I learned watching the three of them, I go like, oh, there's space burgers and space hoagies. Like, you know, at the bar when they ordered, you know, when they were eating, and then like Chapel comes in, and I go like, oh, I've never seen a Star Trek space burger before. I've never seen like a Subway sandwich. And
I guess there's the scene in Discovery where Una comes in and orders a burger on Discovery.
Do I remember that?
It's like her
she
only really scene.
Asks for Chili's. It's like this really fun character moment for her. It's like one of the.
Do we see the burger though?
We do. She takes a big old bite of that burger.
Oh, okay. Well, I must have missed that. Well, there you go.
That was her introduction scene.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I would say when I thought about the three of them, the thing that really stood out to me was friendship.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, it's easy to look at this crew as people who work together. Like these are colleagues because they work together. But that interaction felt so familiar, right? Like, hey, these are my friends, and the way they interacted. And I don't know that we've really seen them interact in almost like an off-duty way that was really like, because it like they're in this was an interesting, from a costume standpoint, we saw a lot of people out of their uniform.
Downtime.
Yeah, a lot of downtime. And so they're hanging out, and we're seeing them, and then like to your point, Myrriah, earlier, like they're sitting there and both Uhura and Ortegas are like, they're sitting there like, if she don't tell this blue blob like what we
Yellow?
already know, or yellow, like, come on. Like that was like the way they were talking to each other. I was just like, wow, it's great to see this what I interpret as a very rich friendship, right? And I think those are the moments. It's like anything else. When you're watching something, you're like, wow, I can see this deep friendship. When they're in peril later, it makes sense. Like, I think that was the issue that we had in Discovery when Ariam died,
Mhm.
is that they sprung it on us and everybody's like, oh my God. And we're like, didn't they just introduce this character like 15 minutes ago? Like, why are y'all so upset? Like, we ain't seen this person all season and now y'all are freaking out. I think what we're seeing now is if they put us in a situation where they've got to save one another, we're going to feel it in a way that we haven't felt it before.
100%. Yeah. And I think too with like, I mean, we kind of know the outcomes we know the outcomes for Chapel and Uhura. And so it's like, we then have this question mark about Ortegas. And so I think it's like, as we develop these relationships, like what are we going to see as the series continues and like some of the stakes that get raised for those characters specifically.
So I also have another question / theory.
Paul theory time.
Paul theory time, sponsored by Peanut Hamper. So we've made the assumption that we are in the TOS timeline just before, but like, is that correct because of like what happened in episode 3 of the season? Because like Khan was already pushed back, so we may not be in the same timeline.
I mean, could the timeline be shifted? Yes, and that is what the producers have confirmed. Do I still think the inevitable outcomes of these characters stays the same? I do think that is true.
I don't know. Like I remember a time when Myrriah said like, screw canon. I don't care about canon. That's not what I care about.
Yeah, I mean, it's like something to think about, but it's not something I like.
So it's possible that like Spock ends up with Chapel. That's what I'm saying.
Oh, that would be. I mean,
because in the in the Kelvin timeline, Spock never hooks up with like
he ends up with Uhura.
Uhura. Yes, Uhura.
Yeah.
I mean, we're gonna get another reboot where he ends up with
T'Pring. What if he ends up with T'Pring?
I'm just saying, like, we might, like, like because of like the La'an episode, like we might not be in the, we'll call it, prime timeline, the original timeline. And truth be told, like, if you go back, like, with Picard, like there was in the sorry to nerd out on everyone, but like you are on listening.
It's a Star Trek podcast.
I don't think you're going to be mad, Paul. Continue. This is what the patrons actually pay for. It's not me making them all mad at me for pointing out flaws in Star Trek.
So here's the thing, like, in Next Gen, like there was an episode where Time Zero, part 1 and 2, where Picard goes back in time and meets Guinan. Mm-hmm. But like in our Picard, like, season 2, we start off at like, this place where Picard doesn't meet Guinan back in the past, mm-hmm. because we're in this, like, what you call it, this authoritarian timeline, right?
Right.
And then they go back in the past, and in that timeline, like Picard had never met, what you call it, Guinan. That's why they meet Guinan for the first time in the bar. And which is different than what is in TOS. So in some ways, I don't know where we are living right now in, I'll call it, Paramount Star Trek right now. Are you okay, Clyde? Timey-wimey.
I mean,
timey-wimey.
I'm gonna get a pen and some paper.
That's right.
I need an illustration, Paul.
Yes. That's right. But there's been so much time travel that, like, I don't truly know if we are in the prime timeline, the Shatner timeline for just so it's a thought.
Yeah, I mean, I'm open to it
because I would totally be down with Spock ending it with Chapel. But who knows?
I gotta agree with Michael. So are we gonna see Sam Kirk get something more meaty
No,
And
no.
just
He's
for
just
the
gonna get
listeners only, Michael
he's gonna
said,
get
I
punched in the
wouldn't.
groin over and over. Like season 1, what did he do? He touches the magic computer. Boom, knocked out. That's all we see of him in season 1. That's all we see.
For the listeners only, Michael L says, I wouldn't mind seeing Sam Kirk get something more to do in the show than just be the target of comedy relief, though watching human clean freak Spock go rage monster against him was funny. I also really identified with clean freak Spock. I am that person who's like, if the kitchen is not clean before I go to bed, I cannot go to bed. Paul can attest to this. I've lived in the same house as Paul.
But he's like Sam Kirk was like literally he was eating whatever it was, his muffin, his bagel, whatever,
space bagel,
his space bagel, and he's now talking, and Spock is like stop what you're doing and go put that away, and I'm like, now if he got up from the meeting and left that plate with the crumbs there, that I would be like, Spock, fully rage on. But I'm like, he hasn't even finished yet. What if he wanted to eat some of those crumbs? That's all I'm saying. Like, what if he was gonna finish off some of the crumbs? You trying to get him to clean his plate, and the man's still hungry. Again, let him have his snack. No, seriously though.
Let the Vulcan win.
I'm looking and I'm saying, we keep poking fun at Sam, right? His brother has a whole episode, right? I'm just wondering, you introduced Sam Kirk. I wonder if we're going to see. Is he going to be meaningful?
I hope we do, because there was that. I mean, it was such like kind of heartbreaking moment in that episode with Kirk and La'an, where he's like, "My brother is still alive," and you were just like, "Oof!" That like you could feel that like little bit of emotion. So, I wouldn't be. I would like to see a random Sam Kirk episode.
Like, what's his specialty? Space archaeology? Is that what, like he's basically Space Indiana Jones, right?
Yeah, let's get it. Let's get him and oh my gosh, the character from Lower Decks who's with Mariner, who goes on all the missions.
Oh yes, I forgot her name. Like, you know,
I'm sure the timeline doesn't work, but it would be really fun to get those two together.
Here's what I really
Petra, thank you,
there we
Mr.
go.
Joseph.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just gonna say, I really want a Sam Kirk and a Jim Kirk like team up episode.
A little brother episode. That'd be cute.
I don't know. I like Sam. I like Sam Kirk as the punching bag.
Sam has a great mustache, though.
Yeah, I know, but he's basically the Toby of Strange New Worlds. And I'm not saying that he can only be Toby, but like, I think it's hilarious.
I was going to say, so next week we have another episode called Lost in Translation. Maybe someone loses some memory. We shall see. And then the episode after that will be Those Old Scientists, which is our crossover episode. This is just me a countdown to the crossover episodes, really, because for a second I thought it was going to be next week and I got really, really excited, but it's actually the week after.
Yeah, I can't wait for it to be problematic and you just be so.
I think I might just cry for a whole episode.
That's right. Like, you're like, oh, it's supposed to be my favorite episode of the season, but we'll see. We'll see.
I mean, I feel like, Myrriah, you have raised the bar on this crossover episode. I mean, is it even possible that it's going to meet your expectations?
I mean, it's directed by Frakes. We've got Quaid and Newsom, who are two of the funniest people on television right now, and I feel like I'm excited. I'm just gonna remain optimistic and
Space
excited.
Force.
No,
just because of.
While you say optimistic, I will write the pilot for Crazy Rich Vulcans.
Perfect.
Like, you can write, House of Martok, House of Honor, or whatever, like, and I'll write Crazy Rich Vulcans.
Perfect. I'll write The Sopranos, but
that's right.
the Klingons.
I need a wire version of Star Trek.
Who would that be? What planet would that be on?
Oh man, it need to be a grimy planet, like a
Talos, like a Talos 5.
Yes, like
Remus. It'd be Remus.
Do y'all have anything else you would like to say about this episode?
Let's
see. Does anything else? No, I think we went. We dissected good and bad.
Yeah. I'm gonna say this, right? We have, for those of you who've been with us for a long time, you've been with us with Discovery and Picard, Strange New Worlds,
Lower
Lower
Decks.
Decks, Prodigy. You've been with us for watches. You've been with us for watch-alongs. Like, you've been with us for a long time. Hopefully, in that time, you know that we tend to be fair, balanced, equal, thoughtful, challenging.
I don't know about all this, Clyde. This is good.
I'm just saying,
I know what you mean.
you know, if we have felt things that are unfamiliar to you, if you feel like, man, this was the greatest episode, and then you guys took it a little too far, I would hope that you would look at us and think about all the times you shared with us, and think about who we are as podcasters, as Star Trek fans, and just say, hey, I can appreciate that you felt differently than I felt about this. And I can't wait to see how you guys, analyze next week's show. That's all I'd say.
And the other thing is, like, the reason I get so uppity about these things is because I genuinely I love this show, and I want it to be a space where all of my friends can see themselves and not be disappointed. You know what I mean? In these ways. And so it's just taking something that I love and asking it to be better, which is all we can also ask of ourselves, of our friends, of our loved ones, is to say, hey, I love you and I see you, and I want you to be the best version of yourself. And that's it.
Space racism, baby.
Space
like in some ways, like, this is one of the things that I really love, is that even in utopia, like,
yeah, 100%.
Like, there's still work to be done.
Yeah, there's always work to be done. There's always ways to make ourselves better, and in our spaces better for everyone involved. But yeah, and if folks have questions, like, and you were like, I don't understand all of your comments on this, like, please hit me up. Like, I'm happy to talk about it more thoroughly. I answer questions you have on Twitter or on Slack or whatever. I'll take a phone call. I'm happy to talk to people about stuff. You can DM me and I will literally give you my phone number. Not to everyone, but to people who I know from our Patreon and have questions.
Listen, I'm going to say, please be nice to Myrriah.
Please.
Yeah. Okay.
Talking to you too, Paul.
Yeah.
Be nice to me. Anyway, I appreciate you guys. Thank you for as always being thoughtful and kind and helping us to create this space. I appreciate you, Paul and Clyde, so much.
Hey,
ditto.
And before we go, can we just plug again? Listen, a week from today, we will be in San Diego at Comic-Con.
San Diego.
I mean, it's going to be amazing to be around so many Star Trek fans. We're 1:00 at the Marriott. I can't remember the room number.
I think the Marriott 12, but it's on our Twitter. It's pinned to my account as well. And we've been sharing it on Instagram, and it's going to be a good time. And I was just going to say something else, and now I can't remember. Oh, SAG is on strike. Our actors are on strike. Our writers are on strike. We are supporting this strike because we believe in equitable and fair pay. It is hard out there for creatives, so we support them. I've been linking to the Entertainment Fund in all of our show notes, so you can go there if you would like to help out crew and support crew who are not able to work right now, who need to make some dollars to support their families. So yeah, studios, get it together, studios.
And I just want to say, as someone who is not in this industry, but close to someone who is, it's more than, so you may hear like the writers are on strike, the actors are on strike, and you're like, okay, well, that's them. This affects everybody. There are people who are getting laid off who aren't actors, who aren't writers, but they support those that industry. They support those people. And so it's kind of like, wow, like for instance, if the writers are on strike and the actors are on strike, you know who you don't need? Makeup artists, right?
Costume designers. People can't show up to set. Like,
I've got friends who are editors, and they're saying, look, like, I can't edit, I can't do my job if the writers aren't writing, right? And so I just want people to understand that this is a lot bigger than saying, oh, those actors that I know that are millionaires are striking. It's bigger than that. It's way
Also,
bigger.
that's such a tiny percentage of the people who are actually actors in the industry. Like, we're talking about background actors. We're talking about all those character actors. Everyone you like, it's not just the stars you see on screen. It's everyone you see on screen is an actor. And so we need to make sure everyone is equally protected. So we can get down off our soapbox now.
Well, no, I get a
Oh,
soapbox.
no,
though.
Paul, soapbox, please.
I remember when I was like in the pandemic, and you know what I watched? Star Trek Picard, and so many other things. Like when the world was falling apart, you know what I did? I watched TV.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's what we did, right? As the world, we basically consumed stories in order to make our lives, better. And now these people just need, to get paid fairly.
Yeah.
This is not just people in LA. This affects everyone because ultimately our stories are who we are. And so, just remember that. So if you can contribute to, please do so.
Yeah.
But first to our Patreon.
The Entertainment Community Fund is linked before our Patreon in the show notes, so you can check that out. And a lot of the Disco Writers Room, a lot of our Star Trek writers have been posting different ways that you can support the strike and the folks who are participating in the strike on Twitter. So definitely follow along. And I think that is it for us tonight. Next week, TBD on what time. Clyde and I have to figure out what's going on while we are in San Diego of how we're going to podcast together, but I'm going to figure it out. We will be live streaming on Thursday to talk about the episode. Time will be confirmed.
Have Mike will travel. No promises on my webcam, though. So if I look a little grainy, just deal with it.
Clyde and I might be in the same room. That could be wild.
But apparently, I will have crisp internet and
yes.
As you see my new mic, and for those who feel like it's tons better, thank you.
We appreciate you, Paul. And we will see you all next week. We appreciate you so much. See you next time. Visit us at StarTrekPod.co to find links to all of the things, show notes, ways to help all of our friends who are on strike. Live long and prosper, y'all. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Let that man have a snack.